Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for our fourth webinar in the Making Net Zero series. This one is entitled Self-Generation, Storage and Renewables, and is designed for a wide spectrum of individuals, from business people just starting out on their net zero journey through to established industry professionals. The webinar should last approximately 30 minutes. My name is John Martin. I'm a product manager for E.ON's Industrial and Commercial Solutions business, focused on solar, storage and DSR, demand side response. Today I'm joined by Graham Provost, who's one of our strategic account managers.
Hello everybody.
The webinar will be focusing on three main areas. Firstly, we'll go through what net zero really means. Secondly, how renewable generation opportunities work, and really just give a high level view of the different technologies which we're seeing being used across the UK. Then Graham will come in and present a deep dive on solar, which highlights both the benefits of solar installations and whether solar is right for your business. And then thirdly, I'll come back in to talk about how solar generation works in a smart grid and how it interacts with batteries and demand side response. Net zero, so it's a term we commonly hear in the industry and more broadly in the news. But just to highlight that net zero means is where we're looking to add no incremental greenhouse gases back into the atmosphere. And it's critical for businesses in this area to develop strategies to balance and reduce their emission levels. I think this was highlighted by the UK government in June 2019, where it became the first major economy to pass legislation requiring the government to reduce net emissions of greenhouse gases by 100% relative to 1990 levels by 2050. To support the net zero legislation, we're seeing increasing numbers of businesses introduce new strategies and targets and put them into place. And we just highlight on the right of this slide the greenhouse gas emission scopes, and probably 1 and 2 are quite key for what we're going to be talking about. So for number 1, emissions which are being produced directly by your business, and number 2, indirect emissions from electricity, heat and steam generation. So the installation of renewable generation will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions being produced from your business activities. And this can directly have a significant positive impact on your net zero targets, as I mentioned on the slide before, especially around numbers 1 and 2 scopes. So this slide is really looking at the different types of common renewable generation technologies which we're seeing in the UK market. So solar PV on the left, which Graham's going to do a deep dive on in a moment, and then wind, hydro, heat pumps and biomass. I'm just going to provide brief updates on each one of those technologies. So for wind, one of the most globally proven technologies. In the UK, we see some of the best conditions for wind turbine output levels. We see it both for businesses who want to reduce their net zero levels and increase their renewable energy, where they've got land in close proximity to their site, where a wind turbine or turbines can be installed locally. And then we also see it for electricity generation, both onshore and offshore. Wind energy developers will offer both guaranteed annual output levels of energy, which is based on historical weather conditions and also turbine output data. They will also offer a guaranteed reduction in energy costs through the 100% renewable energy, and we're seeing a definite improvement in the planning regime, which is supporting wind installation. Next technology we're going to talk about is hydropower, and this is a very well established technology in the UK. where the flow of water is used to turn the turbines to generate electricity. But what is very key with this technology is location, location, location. Because you need to have an established facility, which you know you're going to be based at for a period of time, which is close to a river or the sea. And if you've got that, then actually it can be a great, hydropower can be a great option for your site. Next one we come on to are heat pumps. And as the name really suggests, you're pumping heat from one source to your site. And there's three common types we see: ground, air and water. So where you're moving either heat from the soil in the ground, heat in the water or heat in the air, all through to your site. And then potentially what we normally see is the heat will then heat the hot water in your business. I think the key point on this one, what I'd highlight from a net zero webinar series, is we've got another webinar coming up which is directly talking about heating and decarbonisation. If you've got a real interest in heat pumps, then please look out for this webinar. Next we're going to talk about is biomass. So this is when you're generating energy through burning living matter, i.e. something like biodegradable waste, food or animal waste. You burn it in a boiler to create energy. It can also lead to heat and gas generation, which can be utilised on site. And really where we've seen this to be successful is when there's a clear business case that takes into account the appropriate environmental permitting and the fuel costs prior to the development of the project. Finally, I think three key points that we wanted to highlight, which are real key considerations when you're thinking about a renewable energy project, is firstly planning approvals. So really think about what are the existing rights for your site. Do you have any permitted development rights? Are there any other local examples you have in your geographic area where you've seen a project develop and get approval? Or if you, at this point, you should have a clear view of what technology you want to utilise for your renewable generation. So actually how these types of projects gaining approval through the different planning mechanisms. Next one is network permission. So highlight here G99 and G100. So it's key when you're thinking about renewable energy project that you will have an impact on the distribution network operator, the DNO. That's the local distribution network, and actually what impact they may have. Will there be any additional imports? Will there be any additional exports? Do you have an existing connection agreement which may need amending, or you might even require a new connection agreement? It's a very key part to start kick off those discussions with your operator, potentially with National Grid, and get clarity on how that will work. Final one is funding. There's many different types of funding for these projects, and many different options. I know when Graham does his deep dive on solar, he will highlight how the E.ON funding approach works and the different options for that. So just to summarise, we've run through what net zero means for your business, brief run through of the 4 different renewable generation types, so wind, hydro, heat pumps and biomass. So now pass over to my colleague Graham Provis to talk through a deep dive on solar.
Thanks, John. That was a fantastic overview of the different product types that are out there in the market. Yeah, as John has highlighted a few times, what we're going to do now is look particularly into solar itself and hopefully give you some idea of the solution in general. So my name is Graham Provis, as I mentioned earlier. I'm a strategic account manager for E.ON. My role is to talk to clients about what their needs are and have a look at what their requirements are to achieve net zero. And by doing so, identify what are the legal technologies they can work with. Solar PV is one of the main ones that will allow them to achieve the net zero gains they're trying to do for their business. But solar PV is one of these things that's been around for a while, and it'd be good to try and dispel some of the myths and some of the questions that people have with it. So on this slide, you can see there are different types of solar installations. Most commonly understood is probably the rooftop solar installation. This is increasing numbers of commercial businesses that have rooftop solar on their businesses. The idea behind this is that you utilise the roof space, which isn't get utilised for anything else, and we build solar PV onto that roof space. The building is obviously suitably assessed structurally, and we are also looking at things like wind conditions and loading conditions from snow, etc., to make sure that the roof and the structure itself can take any additional weight loading that's put on top of it in order to then generate the energy that you require to use in your business. It's very critical that this is done in a safe way, and it's very critical that the supplier you use ensures that whatever's being mounted on your roof is done so in a safe and compliant way. So from our point of view, there are lots of rooftop solar in the marketplace, and the reason for this is there are lots of rooftops out there in the commercial space where we can utilise what you have already to actually generate some electricity for you. Another one you'll have seen a lot around is ground-mounted solar, and these are usually large-scale solar arrays, often known as solar farms, where we can utilise a space that's available to generate electricity. Works exactly on the same principles of rooftop, in that the energy is generated from the solar modules that are put onto either the roof or the ground mount area. That energy is then collected, converted into AC, and then being used within your business. So ground-mounted solar is very much a large-scale solution. Very few people do small-scale ground-mounted solar, and large-scale means that you have a lot of energy requirements on your business, and of course you have the available space in order to do so. It's very key to understand that ground-mounted solar, although it's a lot easier to install, as in it's not on a roof and it's on the ground, there's also a lot of issues with ground to ensure that what's underneath the ground can actually mount the ground mount on them. These are the two, what I would class as the two everyday solar PV installations. But there are a couple other things that are starting to develop in the UK market that are showing greater and greater potentiality within the marketplace. Especially with the growing number of electric vehicles in the marketplace, there's an ideal solution called solar carports, which is whereby we utilise a car space where we could take the space that's available that you normally park your vehicles in, put a canopy over the top of them, and cover the top of that roof area, with solar panels, thereby providing an electrical generation source either back into your business or direct to the electric vehicle charging point. If it's something that you're interested in doing and you have a lot of car park space, then this is something that's becoming growing within the UK market. The last one, as I've mentioned in this slide, is floating solar, especially those businesses that have water courses near them or water courses available within their business, i.e. a water company. Then utilisation of solar on top of floating pods on the water allows us to do exactly the same as we do with the ground mount and rooftop. So all these solutions together give you an idea of what we can actually do for you. And this is what's sitting in the marketplace just now and actually seen in the marketplace as being a good option for solar. But what I'd like to do now is go on to have a look at the different innovations that have happened in solar. Innovation in solar for us is a multiple different ideas that are coming through in the market. There are things called bifacial modules, whereby solar modules, for those of you that would know, are only pick up light on one side of them, i.e. they're mono-sided. But actually bifacial models means that we have solar modules actually running on the underside as well, picking up any residual daylight from the ground. This is just trying to make the whole space available as efficient as it possibly can. The second slide is rooftop solar tiles, so you'll see where, especially a domestic area, but it is available in some commercial areas as well, where it's made from the same material as a solar panel, but looks predominantly like a roof tile, and therefore can take the place of the roof tiles that you have altogether. What this is really good for is areas where you have a real cosmetic need or a planning need in order to cover your requirements for your roof area. Something new in the businesses is solar skins, and these are available. These are basically solar PV modules that are built together. And what's really clever about them is they can be customized, so you can have images on them. We can use them to spell out different words. We can cover them with various different types of requirements or colours for your building. There's also less rail racking. They mount straight onto your building themselves. So it allows you to be able to utilise areas that may be of lower space availability, or there may be areas of a slightly more difficult to put standard solar modules on, then solar skins are a very, very good solution for that. Flexible solar does a similar way. They're very lightweight and versatile. So for example, you may have a fragile roof space, then flexible solar is ideal for that type of area. One of the areas that's looking at flexible solar coverage just now are within the fuel stations. And if you look at the canopies that sit above the fuel pumps, they're quite physically limiting, as in they don't have a lot of weight and weight bearing of load around them. Flexible solar and solar skins are both ideal for that area. Lastly, in this stage, there is also various PV modules and inverter improvements. So one of the things that's really key within the solar market is to drive towards delivering the maximum amount of wattage out of the space that's available. And now most manufacturers now have up to 500 watt solutions. So 500 watt and beyond solutions is where we're trying to get to as a sort of holy grail within the solar PV market. What this allows us to do, and if you think about the space you have available for solar PV, we're gaining the maximum amount of output that we can from that space. To give you an idea, 3-4 years ago, we were talking about 250 watt panels. We're now looking at 500 watt panels. So that shows you how much the technology is innovated over the years. The other thing that follows up on this is the new inverters as well that have been put in place. So really interesting to see what they do as well in the market. So looking at numbers, numbers are quite interesting just now, and this is a current snapshot of what's happening in the UK market. Chart on the right shows you the current deployment, so by capacity. So it's showing you, for example, where the greater sizes are of the growth that we have in solar. And right away you can see the space that runs between 50 kilowatt and 5 megawatt is a huge growth area within the solar PV market. And potentially that's most of the areas that we've been discussing with the clients that are on the webinar today. By the end of August, we had just 13.4 gigawatts of solar in the UK, which is a fantastic achievement, just over 1 million installations in place. That's both domestic and commercial. That's increased by about 190 megawatts since August 2019, so over the last year, so it's increased about 1.4%, which considering we have a non-supported system now, that's a really good growth factor to be able to see 1.4% growth. In August 2020, it's the highest number of new installations that we've seen, 3,265, since October 2019. So the effect was showing all the issues that have had with coronavirus around the global marketplace has meant that in the UK market, we've still been managed to carry on and deliver solar PV and deliver growth within solar PV across the market. So that's very good to see from a business point of view. So the future, what does the future of solar look like? Well, the forecast from the government tells us at the moment that we're looking about 2.7 gigawatts of new capacity between now and 2023. That would take us to about 15.6 gigawatts altogether by 2023. So that's a fantastic growth factor to be able to go with. And for your business and your businesses within the webinar today, and also for E.ON, the fantastic growth factor for us all to go for. So currently, if we look at what is solar PV and going to deliver for you, one of the key things for us is looking at the benefits of what we do with solar PV. There's 4 key areas that I've highlighted on this slide. Financial is the first one. Obviously, we're all businesses that we want to have a net zero agenda, a green agenda, but the financial side has to be correct. And solar PV now, I'm pleased to say, is very much in a remit of being able to deliver the funding requirements that you require within your business. Our manufacturers have brought costs of solar modules down. There are numerous funding options that are now available that we can use in order to support your business, which I'll talk about shortly. Lots of people are working within the financial marketplace to provide support for solar PV. It's seen as very much a bankable technology, and seen as very much a technology people want to work with. Key thing for you is whenever you put solar PV on your building or on your ground or on your water, then what it does is it reduces your electricity costs, and that's a key point, by as much as 25% in some areas. It's very easy to install. It's something that can be managed by suppliers and by E.ON, that we look after all the requirements you have in order to install it either on your roof or on your ground area. But not only that, what we also do is operate and maintain the system. So once it's been built, we don't walk away and leave it with you. We operate and maintain the system over the life cycle of the system. Obviously, we're on a net zero webinar. You would expect me to say this, that it's really key on what solar PV will deliver for you in net zero. It helps you achieve your carbon reduction objectives, and actually is one of the real major technologies for achieving carbon reduction across the UK market. One of the things that everybody's very keen to do, including the UK and Scottish governments, is to replace oil combustion. There's a lot of focus on what happens with oil combustion based on the air quality requirements that we have. Solar obviously does that because there are no moving parts with it. And when we move to electrifying areas, then electricity is one of the main areas that we can actually deliver against with solar PV. So looking at the solar PV itself, it's quite interesting to think what are the sort of main rumours, and I've heard lots of these over the years. There's lots of people that have said to us, look, there are various issues we have with solar PV. The first one being weather. Weather's a really interesting one. The weather in the northern UK, the sun doesn't shine enough, at least a challenging business case. We recognise as a business what happens with weather, we take weather into account for the solar projects. But what's really important is that we ensure that we put in place the guarantees that are required via the design that we use within the site and your site itself. So we understand right up front what we're able to deliver for you, and we would only ever tell you what is required on your site based on what the regional weather conditions are. Similarly, roof direction. Again, same sort of idea as weather conditions. South would be fantastic, and if we could have a south-facing roofs across the world, then that would be wonderful. It doesn't exist. So what we're able to do is solutions such as east-west solutions, where we cover more areas within your site and get greater output for you on it. As John mentioned earlier on, planning permission is really keen. Planning permission is a big thing that's a requirement for solar PV. It's something that most suppliers, including ourselves, would do for you now. The good thing about planning permission and planning departments is they see solar as a real benefit to their area. So planners have a real positivity against solar PV. Rather than being something different to put on the roof, it's something they really welcome. Business interruptions wise, we only really have one. We only need to have tech to your building at one point in the installation process. Other than that, everything can be done while your business still operates beneath it. And in fact, we've got one supplier that installed onto the roof of a shopping centre, a very busy shopping centre, while the shopping centre remained open. So that was as little impact they had on the building. So we can do that for you, and all the suppliers will be able to deliver projects that are taken into account. You still manage to return your business. Feed-in tariff was a critical loss, is a thing I hear all the time. This was the government subsidies that weren't aware, and it was put in place when solar PV first started. That was removed on 1st of April for 2019. And what's been really good is our manufacturers have responded to this, and actually the pricing that we now set for solar modules takes into account that a subsidy-free solar world is still a lot of financial benefit to you as a client. Is solar right for your business? It's a big question that you're really probably asking yourself just now. Should I do this? Is this something that I should be doing? Is it worthwhile me doing this? It's vital that you understand what your requirements are for your business. So the first thing we will do, or any given companies that look after you will do, will look at your current energy usage, look at what you're currently using just now, look at what processes, look at controls you have in your business, and then agree and understand exactly what's required for you to connect to the grid, as John mentioned earlier, or to have the planning that's required in your business. That's all reviewed and done by your key supplier. Once we've done that, that really identifies what you actually need, and it's really important that we then talk to the on-site teams and talk about what we need to do in order to manage what your requirements are. Once we've done that, we go off and we do the research, and we look at what are the right opportunities for you on the solar PV. What are the things that we can actually deliver for you? What funding do you need? How do you want to fund it? How do you want to look after this as a real approach to your business? And then the last point is about approaching a supplier. Again, E.ON do that for you, but the one that's really important for yourself is make sure that the supplier you use knows exactly what your requirements are and are able to deliver what your requirements are on site. If we get these areas right, we should see a typical solar system deliver, as I said, about circa 25% more electricity costs and carbon. So that all sounds very good, but in today's marketplace, we have to think about funding. And funding, again, is another one of these areas where it's vital that we have the right funding in place for you. There are two main approaches for me. One is either funded by yourself, so you self-fund it, or you utilise external funding in order to help you, maybe bank funding, it may be financial house funding, but you use funding that you have available from what you're able to get. There are some grants, depending where you are in the country, again, that are available to help support your solar PV ambitions. But E.ON, for example, can offer something called a power purchase agreement, commonly known as a PPA, and that means that there's no front capital outlay to have. All the rest is managed by E.ON themselves. What you do is it's a take or pay system, so all the generation that comes from the roof system that's designed to match your requirements is then paid for within the agreement that we have over the lifetime of the contract. So typically that will always be less than what you're currently paying for the electricity price just now, hence you'll realise a net savings from there. So all in all these solutions are very good to help achieve what your aims are. Okay, it's probably time for me to shut up now. I've been talking about solar PV a lot. There are obviously lots of questions that we can go through with you. Some key points I want to leave you with in my section is very much about the markets in significant growth. The cost of renewables has really dropped significantly, so it makes them very commercially viable just now. E.ON can help you with that. We can fund these projects and we can help meet the net zero strategy that you have. We also put in place a strong solar PV framework of some of the key suppliers in the UK that will help us deliver these projects. Look forward to your questions later on. I'll now hand back to John to take you through the next few stages.
Perfect. Thanks, Graham, and thanks for that deep dive. It's really informative and now feeds into what I'm going to talk about with the really solar generations fitting into a smart grid. So as you can see from the centre of the side, you've got your solar PV being supported. And first thing that will go into the building and clearly would provide energy to supply the building, and you've got energy management software there which you control the building, and that would normally be supported by some type of a cloud storage system to ensure all the information is available and you can optimize the performance of the system. Any surplus power from that really has two options. So it can go into the battery below, which we'll talk in more detail about in just a moment, but also can go into a vehicle to grid. So I think, as Graham mentioned, with electric vehicles become more and more widespread, you have a set of EV chargers there, which the solar PV could support, and actually they can be bidirectional chargers, so they can both have power go to the battery, but it can go both ways, so it's bidirectional, which actually can really help the battery to then support the building if necessary, or to provide demand side response. So if we firstly think about the battery and the main components of that. So there's three main sections of battery I want to highlight. So often you'll hear people call the PCS, and you'll think, what does that mean? So that's a power conversion system. And classically that's your inverter. So it controls the amount of energy charge which can be discharged from the battery system at any time. Classically, if you think of that might be like a funnel, which you might imagine that on a water system. You then have the battery capacity. So actually with battery cells, what size is that battery? So overall capacity the battery can hold, so like the tank of a system. And then finally you have the on-site battery monitoring system, and you'll sometimes hear cycles, which is the throughput. So that's the number of times, cycle is the number of times the battery can be fully charged and then discharged, and that should always be in line with the battery manufacturer's warranty, which they will set that down when you first purchase the battery system. So your basic components. And then if you think about the key battery business cases and how they can be developed for your site. And it's absolutely normal practice when you think about battery business cases that they can be stacked, and that multiples of these will be stacked together to actually create a battery business case. We first think about co-location. So that's really working in line with an OSG, so on-site generation. And great example of that could be solar, from what we just talked through with Graham, or wind. And so that you store any excess energy you get from the solar or wind generation equipment, i.e. it's very bright outside or very high wind, you can store any excess power, and then once that power goes down, then that power output, then the battery power, then can be utilised to supply the site. Clearly, what obvious one below it is net zero. I think, as I mentioned, both mine and Graham's sections, it's a key part of this. So co-located renewable energy source gives the option for site to be 100% renewable energy produced on site and supported on site. Next, we move over in the blue is resilience. So critical business processes, if you've got them on site and then you ever suffer some sort of blackout or brownout, then battery can provide a solution to ensure a continuous power supply. And again, works really well if it's connected with the co-location, so on-site generation assets. Obviously, the length of time you can stay connected could even increase. Final one, if we come up to, is demand-side response and peak load avoidance. So demand-side response can gain you additional revenues through the different DSR markets, and the peak load avoidance can help you avoid additional supply charges through managing when you use energy. And on the next slide, I'm going to talk through high level what we mean by demand side response. So this is classically that you're starting to actively control when you turn down or turn up, or changing what time of day you may be using electricity. It's really helping you to start to proactively manage your electricity usage and consumption. And that really then fits into demand side response. So what I've tried to do here is show some of the key markets from an E.ON perspective and across the market really focus on participating in. So firm frequency response is when you've got assets and they're rapidly being used to reduce demand or increase generation to help balance the electricity grid and avoid power outage, and that's why it's such a quick 30-second or less. It's a really quick time turnaround which batteries can do absolutely adequately meet, but obviously you get payments for supporting national grid through this activity. And then we're seeing dynamic containment come in and replace it. This is designed to operate post-fault, i.e. for deployment after a significant frequency deviation in order to meet the most immediate need for faster acting frequency response. Below it is store, so that stands for short-term operating reserve. So at certain times of the day, the grid may need extra sources of power to help manage extra demand on the system and ensure that it's balanced. And that's where you can get additional payments by adding this extra power. Then you've got the capacity market, so 4 hours, so slightly longer to respond. And this was a main component of the capacity market. And it offers payments to generators and demand-side response providers to provide capacity if called upon. And the capacity opportunities and contracts are won through auctions, which are normally held either 1 or 4 years prior to delivery. Next one is triads. So this is the method National Grid use to they use 3 half-hourly windows over the winter period to calculate the average peak demand, which impacts the costs which will be charged by the supplier to the customer. So why this is key, can it increase your costs? Now we recognise this will drop away with the targeted charging review. This methodology will change on the 1st of April 2022, but it is an opportunity currently. And the final one is spot. So this is using E.ON's position as E.ON's wholesale market position as a supplier for a demand-side response provider to sell their position and gain additional revenue by working with E.ON as a supplier. So I think between myself and Graham, we've covered quite a significant amount of ground, and hope it's been helpful, from renewable generation being a key component in meeting your net zero targets, to the cost of renewables significantly dropping, to the BEIS forecast and the government forecast showing the increases in solar installations, to the smart grid and solar, how it can connect to EVs, etc., and then the batteries and how they can be utilised in the demand side response market. This concludes our content for today. And as we noted at the beginning, this is our 4th of our Making Net Zero series. And as you'll be able to see on screen now, that actually is an overview of the rest of the series and what's planned to come up. And if you haven't already had a chance to register, or if you want to ask a question, please use the email address on screen. Many thanks for your time from both myself and Graham. Bye bye.